अब उसको काटना है.
Of Socialist Party India. So I will just start the session with an invocation, a speech, I would say. So I'm just
with destiny, and now the time comes when we shall redeem our pledge, not only or in full measure, but very substantially. At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom. A moment comes, which comes but rarely in history, when we step out from the old to the new, when an age ends, and when the soul of a nation, long suppressed, finds utterance. It is fitting that at this solemn moment we take the pledge of dedication to the service of India and her people and to the still larger cause of humanity. At the dawn of history, India started on her unending quest, and trackless centuries are filled with her striving and the grandeur of her successes and her failures. Through good and ill fortune alike, she has never lost sight of that quest or forgotten the ideals which gave her strength. We end today a period of ill fortune, and India discovers herself again. The achievement we celebrate today is but a step, an opening of opportunity to the greater triumphs and achievements that await us. Are we brave enough and wise enough to grasp this opportunity and accept the challenge of the future? Freedom and power bring responsibility. That responsibility rests upon this assembly, a sovereign body representing the sovereign people of India. Before the birth of freedom, we have endured all the pains of slavery. But so long as there are tears and suffering, so long our work will not be over. And so we have to labor and to work hard to give reality to our dreams. Those dreams are for India, but they are also for the world, for all the nations and peoples are too closely knit together today for any one of them to imagine that it can live apart. Peace has been said to be indivisible, so is freedom, so is prosperity now, and so also is disaster in this one world that can no longer be split into isolated fragments.
Those of us who have seen Richard Attenborough's magnum opus film Gandhi might recall one particular scene. It was August 1947. Communal riots have broken out in the city of Calcutta, now Kolkata. Gandhi has called for a fast unto death to stop the communal violence. That was his historic fast few months before his assassination. A dispute arose and Nehru runs down through the stairs and excitedly shouts, "A police is a police. There cannot be any Muslim or a Hindu police." This is perhaps a fictional scene, and I do not know the historical accuracy of such an incident in Nehruji's real life, but this depiction tells about a man that he was, who within a few days' time would lead the country as her first prime minister. Jawaharlal Nehru was perhaps the greatest crusader of communalism. He regarded communalism as a scourge dividing the nation and preventing the country's unity. A great leader of the freedom struggle, a founding ideologue of the Indian Republic, an international statesman, and as a beloved leader of the people of India, he stands second only to Mahatma Gandhi in his country. In his own words, I quote, "We talk about a secular state in India. It is perhaps not very easy even to find a good word in Hindi for secular. But people think that it means something opposed to religion. That obviously is not correct. What it means is that it is a state which honors all faiths equally and gives them equal opportunities. That as a state, it does not allow itself to be attached to one faith or religion. which then becomes the state religion. Where the great majority of the people in a state belong to one religion, this fact alone may color to some extent the cultural climate of that state, but nevertheless, the state as a state can remain independent of any particular religion. I unquote. But was Nehru's secularism more Western than Indian? Was his secularism a product of his Fabian socialism and Western education? Did he fail to understand the root of communalism of his own country? Critic Nirad Chaudhary wrote, and I quote, Nehru was completely out of touch with the Indian life, even of his time, except with the life of the self-segregating anglicized set of Upper India, unquote. Chaudhary also holds him responsible for his lack of understanding of Hinduism. There has also been criticisms of him imposing westernized idea of India based on an alien notion of socialism and secularism, which the larger masses of his country could never adhere to. There have also been accusations of his keeping the sword of secularism on Hindus while giving Muslims a free pass. When the Hindu Code Bill was passed in the parliament in 1955, Acharya J.B. Kripalani charged Nehru with, by saying, you are bringing forward a law about monogamy only for Hindu community. Even according to Shashi Tharoor, a Nehru admirer and biographer, and also a member of the Congress party, wrote, if Muslim politicians developed a vested interest in minorityhood, the Nehruvian state evolved a vested interest in its perpetuation. Despite all criticism, Jawaharlal Nehru remains the guiding spirit for the Republic, especially in a time now when fascism and communalism are prime political tool. Today we have Anil Nauriya ji. Anil Nauriya ji studied at St. Stephen's College, Delhi, and later qualified for the bar. He has been counsel at the Supreme Court as well as the High Court. He has done extensive research on contemporary history and politics, and some of his publication includes The African Element in Gandhi, English Anti-Imperialism and the Varied Lights of Willie Pearson. He regularly contributes articles in various journals of repute. Today's Anil ji will be speaking on Nehru, our topic of his research. Sorry, topic of his today. His topic is just a moment. Remembering Nehru, his role in fighting communalism, obscurantism, and feudalism. So now it's over to Anil ji.
Thank you, Abhishek, for your kind words. It's an honor to be here today to speak about Jawaharlal ji, whose birthday it is today. I've already mentioned in an earlier meet we had a few days back that he was just about a fortnight younger to the doyen of the socialist movement, that is Acharya Narendra, who was born on 31st October in 1889. And their lives were considerably entwined. Now, since I have chosen a few topics, because Nehru, Jawaharlal ji is is a subject for extensive discussion. And usually when people write popular literature like the ones which Abhishek referred to, they tend to make a number of general statements which may or may not be accurate. But therefore, let me be specific today and refer to certain specific events that have and battles which Jawaharlal ji fought. Never losing, by the way, never losing his sense of humor. There is that incident which he describes, and this in a way captures the essence of the battles that he would fight in life. There is an incident that he mentions in a controversy with Allama Iqbal, which was carried on in 1935. And in this controversy, he refers to an incident. He refers to, he has written this when he was in Almora district jail in August 1935. I will read this to you because it's worth, I'll skip passages in between, but I think you should have the essence of it because it captures the times. He's writing in 1935, but he's referring to some incidents which took place in the 1920s. Can you hear me? I hope I'm audible enough.
Yeah, we can hear you.
So he says, the title of this article is Orthodox of all religions unite. Orthodox of all religions unite! Exclamation mark. This is an ironical title. He says, some years ago, I happened to be in Benares, and as I was driving through the narrow city streets, my car was held up by a crowd. A procession was passing through, and apart from the processionists, there were many sightseers and little boys intent on sharing in the fun. Crowds interest me, and I got down from the car to find out what was afoot. The procession was certainly an interesting one, and it had certain unique features. We saw Brahmins, the most orthodox of their kind, with all manner of caste marks proudly displayed on their foreheads, marching shoulder to shoulder with bearded Maulvis. The priests from the Ghats fraternized with the mullahs from the mosques, and one of the standards they carried in triumph bore the flaming device, Hindu Musalman Ekta Ki Jai, victory to Hindu Muslim unity. Very gratifying, we thought, but still, what was all this about? We soon found out from their cries and the many other standards they carried. This was a joint protest by the orthodox of both religions against the Sharda Act, or perhaps it was a bill at that time, which prohibited marriages of girls under 14. मतलब वो जो हरबिलास शारदा साहब ने जो बिल इंट्रोड्यूस किया था सेंट्रल असेंबली में 1920s में कि नाबालिग लड़कियों की शादी न होने दी जाए, उस बिल के खिलाफ ये जुलूस निकल रहा था जिसमें ऑर्थोडॉक्स हिंदू और ऑर्थोडॉक्स मुसलमान दोनों मिलकर इस बात का राइट डिफेंड करने की कोशिश कर रहे थे कि उनको प्री प्यूबर्टी गर्ल्स के साथ शादी करने का हक होना चाहिए. इस पे वो इनको लिखते हैं और फिर वो कहते हैं आगे, we mixed with the crowd and marched along for some distance by the side of the procession. Devdas Gandhi was with me. Devdas यानी के महात्मा गांधी के बेटे. Devdas Gandhi was with me and some Banaras friends, and soon we were recognized by the processionists. They did not welcome us or shower greetings on us, and I am afraid we did not encourage them to do so. Our looks and attire separated us from the ranks of the faithful. We had neither beards nor caste marks, and we carried on an irreverent and somewhat aggressive commentary on the procession and its sponsors. ये बात गौर करने की है। वो एक क्राउड में है, क्राउड में अपने आप को पाते हैं और वो उसमें घुस गए और उसमें घुसने के बाद उस क्राउड के जो मकसद है और पर्पस है उसको वो ओपनली क्रिटिसाइज कर रहे हैं उन्हीं के सामने, उन्हीं लोगों के सामने। ये थे जवाहरलाल जी। मतलब कि जिस मकसद से ये जुलूस निकल रहा है उस मकसद से इत्तेफाक नहीं किया, लेकिन ये नहीं कि किनारा काट के निकल गए, वो उस जुलूस में घुसे और उस जुलूस में घुसने के बाद उन जो लोग जुलूस में हैं उनकी नुक्ताचीनी करते करते आगे बढ़ रहे हैं उनके साथ साथ। तो उसका नतीजा ये हो रहा है कि वो इनको ना ग्रीटिंग्स मिली, ना उनको कोई वेलकम मिला। And I am afraid our looks and attire separated us from the ranks of the faithful. We had neither beards nor caste marks, and we carried on an irreverent and somewhat aggressive. हमने aggressive होके उनको criticize किया, aggressive commentary on the procession and its sponsors. और फिर क्या होता है ये जरा गौर कीजिए। Offensive slogans were hurled at us. मतलब ये हैंडफुल लोग हैं जो एक गाड़ी में से उतरे हैं, ज्यादा लोग नहीं है, गाड़ी में कितने लोग आएंगे, मान लीजिए 4-5 लोग आ जाएंगे, तो 4-5 लोग हैं और ये पूरे क्राउड का गुस्सा अपने पे ले रहे हैं और चूक नहीं रहे उन क्राउड को क्रिटिसाइज करते हुए, और कह रहे हैं कि फिर क्राउड ने ऑफेंसिव स्लोगन्स हमारे खिलाफ करने शुरू करे। Offensive slogans were hurled at us and there was some jostling about. Just then the procession arrived at the town hall and for some reason or other started stone throwing. A bright young person thereupon pulled some crackers, and this had an extraordinary effect on the serried ranks of the orthodox. Evidently thinking that the police or the military had opened fire, they dispersed and vanished with exceeding rapidity. यहाँ ये दूसरी कैरेक्टरिस्टिक डिस्क्राइब करते हैं जो इस किस्म के तबके की जो फिरके वाराना सांप्रदायिक तबका होता है कि कैरेक्टरिस्टिक कि जरा सा उनको खतरा महसूस होता है तो वो वहां से दुम दबा के भाग भी जाते हैं। तो ये बात भी उन्होंने इसको रिकॉर्ड किया और फिर आगे वो चाइल्ड मैरिज एक्ट की क्या क्या प्रोविजंस थे उसके बारे में लिखते हैं। पर फिर उनका कंक्लूजन ये है that this instance of the Sharda Act was a revealing one, for it showed that all the shouting about Hindu-Muslim friction and disunity was exaggerated and in any event misdirected. That there was such friction nobody could deny, but it was the outcome not so much of religious differences as of economic distress, unemployment, and a race for jobs, which put on a sanctified garb and in the name of religion deluded and excited the masses. If the difference had been essentially religious, one would have thought that the orthodox of the two faiths would be the farthest removed from each other and the most hostile to each other's pretensions. As a matter of fact, they combine frequently enough to combat any movement of reform, social, economic, or political. Both look upon the person who wants to change the existing order in any way as the real enemy. Both cling desperately and rather pathetically to the British government, for instinctively they realize that they are in the same boat with it. ये एक बड़ी विविड कमेंट्री कम्युनलिज्म के नेचर पे 1935 में उन्होंने लिखी अल्मोड़ा डिस्ट्रिक्ट जेल से, जिसमें वो 1920 की दशक के कुछ वाक़े बता रहे हैं। अब मैं कुछ चीज़ें जो आज़ादी के बाद हुई उन पे मैं आता हूँ। The first thing is that if you know the constitution was adopted on 26 November 1949 and it came into effect. The date of commencement is said to be 26 January 1950. फर्स्ट जनरल इलेक्शंस के बाद जो पहली लोकसभा बनी वो 1952 में बनी। तो 1950 और 52 के बीच में एक वक्फा था, एक गैप था। उस गैप में जो कंस्टिट्यूएंट असेंबली के मेंबरान थे, दे फंक्शनड एज द प्रोविजनल पार्लियामेंट। तो 1950 और 51 में प्रोविजनल पार्लियामेंट हुआ करते थे, जो कि वही कंस्टिट्यूएंट असेंबली के मेंबरान थे, who were functioning as the provisional parliament. अब इसी दौरान आज़ादी के बाद आपको मालूम है, soon after independence, the जमींदार कांग्रेस यूपी में और जगह जहाँ जहाँ पावर में थी, वहाँ लैंड रिफॉर्म्स के इनैक्टमेंट्स हुए। यूपी में जमींदारी एबॉलिशन का बिल बना, एक्ट हो गया। ऐसे ही कुछ और प्रांतों में, बिहार में हुआ और इस पे लिटिगेशन हुआ। These acts of land reforms were challenged in the various high courts very severely. तो सबसे पहले जो मुकाबला जवाहरलाल जी ने किया वो फ्यूडलिज्म का किया। ये जो फ्यूडल इकोनॉमिक रिलेशंस, फ्यूडल मोड ऑफ प्रोडक्शन था, उसका मुकाबला जवाहरलाल जी की लीडरशिप में तब हुआ। और फर्स्ट अमेंडमेंट जो संविधान का, फर्स्ट अमेंडमेंट टू द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन was brought at this time in the provisional parliament, यानी कि कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन अडॉप्ट होने के 24 महीने भी नहीं हुए थे कि ये फर्स्ट अमेंडमेंट लाया गया। और फर्स्ट अमेंडमेंट वाज सो बेसिक टू आवर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल सिस्टम कि उसकी वजह से ये लैंड रिफॉर्म जो हुआ हमारी कंट्री में वो बच गया, क्योंकि फर्स्ट अमेंडमेंट इंट्रोड्यूस्ड द 9th शेड्यूल टू द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन which protected about a dozen land reform related and other acts from challenge in courts on the ground of violation of fundamental rights. This was a very important thing because although you will all recall that we obtained independence and there was a change in the nature of the political regime, the old judiciary had continued as it was. And the judiciary was prone to interfering very actively against the land reform legislation that was being introduced in the various states. So, the first initiative which Jawaharlal ji takes is in defense of land reforms by introducing the 9th schedule into the constitution with an amendment to Article 31. Article 31B was introduced and the 9th schedule was introduced, in which a dozen or so laws were added which were protected from challenge on the ground of violation of fundamental rights. So in a way, you could say that what happened at this time broke the back of feudalism in the country, because this 9th schedule was upheld और इसकी कंट्रोवर्सी चलती रही, बहुत दशकों तक चलती रही, early 1980s तक चलती रही, but essentially the 9th schedule was upheld by the courts, Supreme Court, and it has become part of our constitutional and legal structure. Subsequently, there have been cases where certain laws which do not deserve to be placed in the 9th schedule have also been placed in the 9th schedule, but that is a separate controversy. For the time being, I can only say that the first amendment introduced by Jawaharlal Ji very strongly in his own words, and I want to read to you what Jawaharlal Ji said when the first amendment was introduced by him, was supported and introduced by him. The bill, there were other aspects to this bill which I will come to. This bill is not a very complicated one, nor is it a big one. Nevertheless, I need hardly point out that it is of intrinsic and great importance. Anything dealing with the Constitution and change of it is of importance. Anything dealing with fundamental rights incorporated in the Constitution is of even greater importance. Therefore, in bringing this bill forward, I do so, and the government does so, in no spirit of lightheartedness, in no haste, but after the most careful thought and scrutiny given to this problem. और फिर वो तरह तरह के जो क्रिटिसिज्म्स हो रहे हैं बिल का, उसका जवाब देते हैं, और फिर ये लैंड रिफॉर्म के मसले पर वो कहते हैं कि a dynamic movement towards a certain objective necessarily means certain changes taking place. That is the essence of movement. Now, it may be that in the process of dynamic movement, certain existing relationships are altered, varied, or affected. In fact, they are meant to affect those settled relationships. And yet, if you come back to the fundamental rights, they are meant to preserve, not indirectly, certain settled relationships. There is a certain conflict in the two approaches, not inherently, because that was not meant, I'm quite sure. But there is that slight difficulty, and naturally, when the courts of the land have to consider these matters, they stress more on the fundamental rights than on the directive principles of state policy. The result is that the whole purpose behind the Constitution, which was meant to be a dynamic Constitution leading to a certain goal step by step, is somewhat hampered and hindered by the static element being emphasized a little more than the dynamic element, and we have to find a way of solving it. वो ये कह रहे हैं कि जो फंडामेंटल राइट्स चैप्टर हमने इंट्रोड्यूस किया था कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में, ये इसलिए इंट्रोड्यूस किया था कि सर्टेन बेसिक फ्रीडम्स आर प्रोटेक्टेड, पर जो हम डायनामिक चेंजेस कंट्री में ला रहे हैं उससे कुछ सेटल्ड रिलेशनशिप जो पुरानी बनी हुई हैं वो डिस्टर्ब होंगे, और वो डिस्टर्ब होने के लिए ही ये चेंजेस, उन सेटल्ड रिलेशनशिप्स को अल्टर करने के लिए ही हम चेंजेस ला रहे हैं. तो अगर फंडामेंटल राइट्स चैप्टर को वही स्टैटिक रिलेशनशिप्स को प्रिजर्व करने के लिए होगा, तो फिर देयर विल बी अ सर्टेन कॉन्फ्लिक्ट, बिकॉज दैट वाज नॉट द ऑब्जेक्ट ऑफ द फंडामेंटल राइट्स. सो देयरफॉर वी आर ब्रिंगिंग फॉरवर्ड दिस amendment. And then this is the line that he takes all along, and this has, in fact, this engendered a big controversy with Shyama Prasad Mukherjee and others in the House. But the ultimate outcome was that with a large majority, the bill was passed. Now, this is as regards land reform, but this is not the only thing that the First Amendment did. Now I'll bring you to another aspect of the First Amendment. which is seldom mentioned. That was that this whole ये जो OBC की controversy इतना ज्यादा जिसका जिक्र होता है, OBC reservations वगैरह, ये प्रोविजन भी फर्स्ट अमेंडमेंट में लाया गया। ये बहुत ज्यादा आम जानकारी नहीं है, लेकिन आर्टिकल 15 कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन का वो ये कहता था, स्टेट शैल नॉट डिस्क्रिमिनेट अगेंस्ट एनी सिटीजन ऑन ग्राउंड्स ओनली ऑफ रिलीजन, रेस, कास्ट, सेक्स, प्लेस ऑफ बर्थ और एनी ऑफ देम. No citizen shall on grounds only of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth or any of them be subject to any disability. Nothing in this article shall prevent the state from making any special provision for women and children. अब इसके आगे एक सब क्लॉज इंट्रोड्यूस किया गया, सब क्लॉज 4. ये फर्स्ट अमेंडमेंट से ही इंट्रोड्यूस हुआ. And this was that nothing in this article or in clause 2 of article 29 shall prevent the state from making any special provision for the advancement of any socially and educationally backward classes of citizens or for the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes. तो ये जो clause 4 है article 15 का, ये वही फर्स्ट अमेंडमेंट की देन है जो जवाहरलाल जी ने बड़ी विगर के साथ पुश किया पार्लियामेंट में, प्रोविजनल पार्लियामेंट में. इससे फर्स्ट जनरल इलेक्शन से भी पहले ये अमेंडमेंट आ गया कि प्रोविजन तो अक्सर जो हम ये सोशलिस्ट मूवमेंट में भी ओबीसीज के बारे में जब जिक्र करते हैं तो वी समटाइम्स फॉरगेट द रोल ऑफ जवाहरलाल नेहरू in this. We do talk of others, we do talk of our own movement's role, and we do talk of Karpuri Thakur, and we do talk later on of VP Singh, and we do talk of BP Mandal, but we seldom mention Jawaharlal Nehru and his government, which introduced this provision. So this is a point which in a general way Madhu Limai has recognized when he said that Jawaharlal ji championed progressive politics. Madhu Limai in his work, Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru, a historic partnership, in volume 4, he mentions this, that Jawaharlal Nehru championed progressive politics. So he acknowledges this fact, although you find often find multiple propositions in Limai's work at various points, but this he acknowledges very clearly that Jawaharlal Nehru championed progressive politics. And one of the points that he mentions here is Hindu law reform, to which I will now come. Hindu law reform was a major achievement of the Jawaharlal Nehru government in the 1950s. Let me go into this in some detail because there is often a focus on the Ambedkar resignation, and because the Hindu Code Bill could not be enacted in the session in September-October 1951 of the Provisional Parliament. And as we know, Dr. Ambedkar resigned on that, primarily on that issue. But there are aspects of this which again are not very widely known. So I will go into those. Yes. Dr. Ambedkar was hoping that the Hindu Code Bill, which had been drafted after a great deal of inquiry into the subject, there had been the B.N. Rao committee, and there was also later the Pataskar committee. But the Hindu Code Bill was a very large and long bill. And it was hoped that it would be passed in this last session of the year 1951. But there is some correspondence between Dr. B.R. Ambedkar and Jawaharlalji on this subject. And let me just take you to a little bit of it. First of all, Jawaharlalji writes to Dr. Ambedkar that about the Hindu Code, this is on 10th August 1951. About the Hindu Code Bill, you know that we have a good deal of opposition, not only inside the house, but outside. With the best will in the world, we cannot brush aside this opposition and get things done quickly. They have it in their power to delay a great deal. We must therefore proceed with some tact and with a view to achieve results. I am anxious that the bill should be passed in this session. As you will see from this correspondence, Jawaharlalji is very keen, along with Dr. Ambedkar, that the bill is passed in this session itself, the ongoing session, which is going on in August, September, October. On the same day, he writes to Babu Shri Prakash, who was his contemporary at Cambridge, about the Hindu Code Bill. This matter was considered at a cabinet meeting. You were not there then. It was then decided that it must be given priority during this session. And he is writing this to another colleague of his. Later at the party meeting, this was again discussed, and it was a viewpoint even of some of the opponents of the bill, that the bill should be taken up and passed during this session. Of course, they added that the controversial clauses should be left out, but they felt that a pending bill with many clauses to which they objected would probably be a greater handle to their opponents in the elections. Elections bhi aane wale the. So everybody was keen that whatever is to be done should be done early. Everybody, including Dr. Ambedkar, because Dr. Ambedkar in the coming elections would have to fight independently on his own political platform, and was therefore also waiting to leave the government for that reason. His resignation, although it's prompted by the Hindu Code Bill, it is also prompted by the coming general elections, which he has to fight on his own party platform. I think, therefore, that the bill should be proceeded with, even though the president, the speaker, and the deputy speaker are against it. देखिए ये कह रहे हैं जवाहरलाल जी, श्री प्रकाश जी को लिख रहे हैं, क्योंकि उनके कैबिनेट कॉलीग थे उस वक्त, and he was a contemporary of Jawaharlal ji at Cambridge. He's saying, I think the bill should be proceeded with, even though the president, the speaker, and the deputy speaker are against it. In fact, it was mentioned in the president's address. It is possible, of course, to vary some of its provisions. So, ये फिर वो लिखते हैं कुछ दिन बाद डॉक्टर अंबेडकर को, My dear Ambedkar, progress in Parliament has been very slow and we have got rather stuck up. There are quite a number of important bills which we must pass. I had hoped, as you know, to take up the Hindu Code Bill on the 5th of September. But I fear this will be difficult for a variety of reasons. One of these is that we have not got enough time before that to consider it fully in the party, which is important to save time. Otherwise, we shall get bogged down. Another reason is that during some days of next week, the Afghan Prime Minister is going to take a lot of time. The third reason is that owing to the proximity of the AICC meeting, it will be difficult to carry on anything, both in the party and parliament, with ease. Members' minds will be elsewhere. I am suggesting therefore that Monday, September 10th, be fixed for the Hindu Code Bill, and that we should proceed with it day to day after that. ये जवाहरलाल जी चाहते हैं day to day उसका discussion हो 10 सितंबर के बाद. Next week, that is from 4th to 9th September, we should have at least 2 party meetings to consider the Hindu Code Bill. This ought to enable us to be quite ready for discussion in Parliament. I am sending a copy of this note to Satyanarayan, Minister for Parliamentary Affairs. Then, so this goes to show how keen. Meanwhile, the president raised certain technical objections to provisional parliament. ने ये करना चाहिए कि नहीं करना चाहिए वगैरह. So Jawaharlal ji replies very strongly to those objections. To the president, to Rajendra Prasad. I'll just read some paras. You have been good enough to mention to me on several occasions your disapproval of the Hindu Code Bill. I pointed out on each occasion that the government had given the most earnest consideration to the principles underlying this bill and were fully committed to them. This bill is not a new measure, and it has been before the country for a number of years. There has been a very great deal of discussion and argument about it outside and within Parliament. It is after the fullest consideration of all the factors that the government came to the conclusion to press this bill forward in Parliament. It has already been discussed in the earlier stages at great length. There have been many informal committees, and noted public men representing various viewpoints have been consulted. As a result of such consultations, major changes have been made in the bill. The object aimed at was to reduce controversy to a larger extent and to gain as large a measure of approval of the bill as possible. The question of the competence, because the president had also raised the question of the competence of the provisional parliament to pass such a wide-ranging bill. So to this, also Jawaharlal ji replies, the question of the competence of the present parliament to enact such a measure was raised in parliament itself, and after much discussion, the speaker gave a ruling on this subject. The various grounds mentioned in para 1 of your note were considered by parliament and a decision taken thereon. It is hardly open to anyone, even the president, to challenge that decision. So he has taken on even the president of India on this subject. Otherwise, the question would arise as to whether Parliament is the supreme legislative authority in this country or not. So this controversy goes on. Then, then he writes to Dr. Ambedkar, saying that he has received some objections which need to be looked at. Then he says he writes to the Attorney General, Setalwad, saying that I have this correspondence with the President. Please look up some British precedents to help to support our position, and so on. Then he writes to Gopalaswamy Iyengar, who is in his cabinet. He says, my dear Gopalaswamy, thank you for a long letter about the Hindu Code Bill. Gopalaswamy is raising some of the objections which Abhishek had mentioned in his introduction. So far as the president's threatened step is concerned, I am quite sure that he is in the wrong. If he persists in it, a crisis will certainly come, and government should resign. Jawaharlal ji is writing to his cabinet colleague to tell him that if a crisis comes on this Hindu Code Bill, then government should resign. I regret to say that the president attaches more importance to his astrologers than to the advice of his cabinet in some matters. I have no intention of submitting to the astrologers. The position as regards the Hindu Code Bill is that it is highly unlikely that we will finally pass even part 2 during this session. You know, Dr. Ambedkar had divided the bill into 2 parts, part 1 and part 2, and he had introduced part 2, the Hindu Code Bill part 2, which related to certain issues concerning marriage and so on. He introduced that part in this session in the hope that that would be passed. So Jawaharlal ji is saying that the position as regards the Hindu Code Bill is that it is highly unlikely that we will finally pass even part 2 during this session. We may get through a large part of it during the second reading, but something is likely to be left over. I think that we would be justified to finish that small part which is left over during the February session. It is difficult to decide now because much would depend upon various developments. It would be improper to take up something important and new during the February session. Then, this is the important. I think that we ought to be prepared to take a strong line in regard to any reform that we may consider important. It is always open to the electorate to dismiss us. We ought to be prepared to take that chance. Democracy is all right, but it has to be given a forcible lead and not allowed to work passively in the ruts. Personally, I am convinced that a great majority of the electorate could approve of this bill, though perhaps a majority of 10% of the Hindus of the upper classes might not do so. Because the bill recognized enhanced the rights of women. Women had no right to hold property until this bill came. The property could not be held. So this bill enhanced women's rights in property, and it introduced monogamy, which is that it did away for the first time in the history of our country the practice of multiple marriages at the will of the husband in the largest part of the Indian society, that is Hindu society. Personally, I am convinced that a great majority of the electorate could approve of this bill, so perhaps a majority of 10% of the Hindus of the upper classes might not do so. So this is what happened. And then meanwhile, Dr. Ambedkar submitted his resignation because it became clear that it might not be passed in the current session. So this is what Jawaharlal ji writes to him. It's a lovely letter, and I'll read it out. It's a short letter. This is written on 27 September 1951. My dear Ambedkar, I have your letter of 27 September. 2 days ago, news of your resignation appeared in the press, and I was rather mystified. At the beginning of the session, you spoke to me about your ill health, and I know, of course, that you have not been keeping well. In view of your ill health and your desire to resign from the cabinet, I cannot press you to stay on. I should like to express, however, my appreciation of our comradeship during these years, since when we have worked together in the cabinet. We have differed sometimes, but that has not affected my appreciation of the good work that you have done. I am sorry indeed that you will be going away. I can quite understand your great disappointment at the fact that the Hindu Code Bill could not be passed in this session, and that even the marriage and divorce part of it had ultimately to be postponed. I know very well how hard you have labored at it and how keenly you have felt about it. Although I have not been intimately connected with this bill, I have been long convinced of its necessity, and I was anxious that it should be passed. I tried my utmost, but the fates and the rules of Parliament were against us. It seemed clear to me that nothing that we could do could get it through during this session. Personally, I shall not give up this fight because I think it is intimately connected with any progress on any front that we desire to make. You say that you would like your resignation to take effect immediately. but you are good enough to suggest that you stay on till some of the bills and motions standing in your name are dealt with. I shall look into this matter. In any event, this session is going to last only till the 6th of October. That is a little more than a week from today. There is not much room left for priorities during a few days. We shall try to push in your bills and motions as soon as possible. I hope, therefore, you will stay on till the end of the session. With all good wishes to you, yours sincerely, Jawaharlal Nehru. And then he keeps this promise. ये जो promise उन्होंने जवाहरलाल जी ने यहाँ डॉक्टर अम्बेडकर को किया, I shall not give up this fight because I think it is intimately connected with any progress on any front that we desire to make. और फिर वो जो फर्स्ट लोकसभा जो बनी उसमें जो ये बिल्स को पार्ट्स में लाया गया, तो पहले हिंदू सक्सेशन एक्ट के फॉर्म में आया, वो पास हुआ, उसमें बहुत बहस हुई, बड़ी बिटरनेस फैली जवाहरलाल जी के खिलाफ उसकी वजह से, और फिर वो हिंदू मैरिज का भी बिल लाया गया जिसकी वजह से विमेन के राइट्स एनहांस हुए और पहली बार डिवोर्स की पॉसिबिलिटी लाई गई। तो ये सब जो प्रोविजंस आए, इनका ये हिंदू मैरिज रिफॉर्म्स का जो स्पीच जवाहरलाल जी ने उस वक्त करी, उसमें यही बात होती थी कि साहब हिंदू मैरिज तो सेक्रेमेंट है, हाउ कैन यू इंट्रोड्यूस डिवोर्स। तो इस पे जो जवाहरलाल जी ने बातें कही वो भी पढ़ने लायक है। और इसी डिबेट में उन्होंने अशोक का रॉकी डिक्ट 12 भी कोट किया, जिसमें वो कहते हैं वन हू रेवरेंसेस one's own religion and disparages that of another from devotion to one's own religion and to glorify it over all other religions does injure one's own religion more certainly। ये बात इसलिए उठी कि कुछ और कम्युनिटीज को कहा गया कि ये अमेरिका में ऐसे होने लगा है। किन्सी रिपोर्ट कोट की गई थी, ये एनसी चैटर्जी साहब ने भी इसका काफ़ी ऑपोजिशन सक्सेशन एक्ट का जो प्रोविजन लाए गए, सक्सेशन एक्ट जो लाया गया उसको भी क्रिटिसाइज किया, और ये भी क्रिटिसाइज किया ये जो हिंदू मैरिज एक्ट का प्रोविजन है। तो इस पर जवाहरलाल जी ने काफ़ी कुछ कहा कि ये सक्सेशन हम पहली बार ये राइट्स दे रहे हैं विमेन को, और इस पे इतराज नहीं होना चाहिए। As you know, we attach great importance to these social reforms and Hindu law measures. Unfortunately, they have been held up for a long time past, and it is a matter of considerable satisfaction to me that we are now moving at last. The progress of a nation can only take place on all fronts, political, social, and economic. We have laid stress on the political aspect in the past and are now thinking more and more of the economic aspect, but the social aspect is at least as important. Indeed, the economic aspect cannot go far without adequate measures of social reform. I am glad also that we have had a bill relating to untouchability, etc. So this is roughly what I wanted to draw your attention to, and I may conclude with, for the time being, with with something about his general approach to communalism, and how Jawaharlal ji linked this to fascism and to the economic aspect, the fight against feudalism. So ये गांधी जयंती पे जवाहरलाल जी ने 1951 में यही सब जब झगड़े चल रहे थे जिसका मैंने अभी तक जिक्र किया, उन्हीं दौरान ये स्पीच भी दी। He warned, दिल्ली की स्पीच है गांधी जयंती पर, 1951 में, 1951, 2nd October. He warned the people against unscrupulous elements which were spreading poison to suit their ends. In their communalism, I see germs of fascism, he declared. Zamindars, talukdars, and former princely rulers, he said, were aligning themselves with the communalists and were financing their movements because in their success, they saw the only chance of retaining their jagirs. Referring to a Hindu code bill which was postponed, he said he had supported the bill and will continue to support it and work for its acceptance. He continued to say that even though some people were opposing it on religious and communal grounds, he thought it was a very progressive measure and essential in as much as India could not go forward without it. Nehru was particularly critical of the Jan Sangh, which aims at binding the human mind within the confines of narrow and superficial religion. He had also received reports of their harassing Muslims, he said. That would not be tolerated, and he would use the entire force of the government to check it. Nehru, added PTI, the Press Trust of India, described the communal forces in India as embodying the very essence of fascism and said that no quarter would be given to them. As far as he was concerned, he would fight communalism till the last breath of his life, both inside and, if need be, outside the government. Nehru made a sweeping attack on communal elements in India and said that all reactionary forces and men with small petty minds had made a common front under all sorts of garbs. अब ये जो common front वाली बात है, ये वही 30 साल पहले वाला किस्सा जिससे मैंने शुरू किया था, उसी पे इशारा, उसी किस्म की अलायंसेस पे इशारा करता है. Before I end, I just want to say that the writings of Madhulimai are very interesting when one speaks of Jawaharlal, because I think Madhulimai was the one socialist who, along with N.G. Gore in the 1930s and Acharya Narendra, who strongly resisted the RSS. And there is an essay by Madhulimai in his book Politics After Freedom, where he refers to the fact that how the RSS has in fact how it was actually founded. He says it was founded under with the blessings of the feudal elements in the country. It was founded with the blessings of feudal princes. And this is he's writing in 1970s when this controversy about privy purses and so on of the princes was also fresh in the minds of people. So you know, I won't go into certain other aspects right now. I think I'll just end here. That we need to take inspiration from some of these writings, such as that of Madhulimai, to reinvigorate our fight against the communal elements, the obscurantist and feudalistic tendencies in our society, which have been rightly linked, interestingly, by Jawaharlalji to fascism as early as 1951, when he spoke on Gandhi Jayanti in Delhi. So it is quite remarkable. I was reading it today and I was struck by this fact. So with these words, I would like to end by paying my tribute to the memory of Jawaharlal.
Thank you, Anil Nauriya, for your very thought-provoking speech, as always. And now it's, I think we should take questions if I think those who are attending the this particular program can just unmute and ask questions to Anilji.
You can invite Professor Meera Chakravarti. She has
Professor Meera, please, please come. Please, I can't see her here in the screen, but she. Yes, yes, ma'am. Please unmute and.
Yes. To Professor Nauriya ji, I already put the question in the chat, thinking that I'm a former State Commission member, Women's Commission, and we had J.H. Patel as our CM at that time in Karnataka. I am amazed that as far as women's movement is concerned, we are quite comfortable with Nehru's steps that have been taken, and to an extent Gandhiji, because Gandhiji brought such a lot of women in action. But I'm just wondering if you could highlight as to that the first parliament had so many socialist members, though they later on divided as PSP and SSP, Praja Socialist Party, and Samip Socialist Party. Now, how could not could not they help Nehru in implementing the or in helping him expressing his socialist ideology in concrete manifestations? The Hindu code, this is very funny that the whole patriarchal element worked against the Hindu marriage bill, their code there. While all the women, almost I think the whole of Indian women, all the women I think participated in the independence struggle. Even now, I mean that stream continues even now, but we have through women's movement and struggle have achieved quite a lot. So I wonder, even now, what with the Socialist Party, Randir is putting it as Socialist Party. So I'm very happy because it's a Socialist Party. I'm continuously attending because we were in association with the Dandavate's family and JP's movement, etc. So how would the socialist element once again can really be practical and try to do what work could not have been done here? I know, I mean, I'm sorry to stretch the question. This you may not answer or may answer, but my pain is that having such socialist elements in the thing. Why? I mean, Basavan Sinha, JP, Acharya Narendra Deva, etc. All these people have been so helpful. So why is it that? Why was this hesitation on part of Nehru, or did he not get enough strength? Thank you so much. Thank you for lengthening it. Thank you, Randir. Abhishek.
Should I respond now, or I just wanted one clarification. You were referring to hesitation on the part of Nehru. I'm not. Could you clarify that? Which hesitation are you referring to, Miraji?
Because I think the invitation says that it is socialism and I'll just regarding sorry, it says remembering Nehru is his communalism, obscurantism and feudalism, of course. But I refer to it because they have written as a socialist party has been given. The name of the socialist party has been there. So
what I was asking you.
Yeah.
You mentioned, Miraji, you mentioned Nehru's hesitation. I couldn't quite get that. What hesitation with respect to?
Yeah, so yeah, that is what we got.
Anil Bhai, what I have understood is she's asking about the hesitation of socialists in supporting Nehru in the progressive agenda.
Well, that is today not the subject of my talk. And I don't want to say anything, but I don't get a good impression. Reading the correspondence with Jawaharlalji, which the socialists have, and even after Jawaharlalji manages to get the socialistic pattern accepted in 1955 at the Avadi session of the Indian National Congress, socialists were not responsive enough to what he was doing. And even 2 years earlier, when Jawaharlalji invites Jayaprakash for talks, then Jayaprakash responds with a long list of preconditions. I think now when one reads it, one realizes that given the sort of struggles that Jawaharlalji was leading in Parliament and in the country, to impose these kind of preconditions to a former colleague whose intentions you could not really doubt was seemed a bit odd. And I think it emerges from the, once an organization separates and becomes an organism of its own, then it develops an institutional ego of its own. And I think it comes from that. I wouldn't necessarily blame any particular individuals, but I think it comes from what I might call the institutional ego of the socialists. Because ultimately, when the time came to, if you look at the 1970s and so on, when it was a question of aligning with the Jan Sangh on certain issues, Navnirman or the Bihar movement, then there is no such correspondence setting conditions on the Jan Sangh that you do this XYZ and only then will be supportive and so on. But these conditions have been imposed on Jawaharlalji and the Congress. So it's a bit sad.
What I meant was that these were progressive elements.
Yes.
And Nehru was trying to bring a progressive element in that, introducing that. So you call it communism, socialism, and they are the left side. Okay. But so therefore what happens is these progressive elements could have supported him in the sense, whether you call him socialist or not, that's a different thing. Okay. But that should have.
We seem to be on the same page, Miraji. We seem to be on the same page here. We are on the same page.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Anilji. I don't find any other question in the chat box, but
may I make a comment?
yeah, sure.
Nauriya ji, I'm making a comment about
Samartha, how are you?
A modernist Jawaharlal Nehru. You might remember the letter that Jawaharlal Nehru, Gandhiji wrote to Nehruji in 1945 on 5th of October, where he says that if there is any fundamental difference between you and me, then the people of India must know about it. And Gandhiji speaks about his India of villages, that the dream of village is still in my mind. And that village will not be the village of today. Any men and women will be able to stand against anybody, anywhere in the India, in my village. And Nehruji replies 4 days later on 9th of October. In that he says that Hind Swaraj was written 38 years back, but the world has completely changed since then. Then please note these words, perhaps in a wrong direction. Then he says that you are right in saying that the world and a large part of it is bent on committing suicide. That may be an inevitable consequence of an evil seed planted in civilization. So in drinking the poison of the modern paradigm of development, Nehruji tried to make India industrialized. And that is what we see today. The hungriest people of the whole world stay here in India, and every 3 seconds a child dies out of malnutrition. This is the situation which we have come to. So we have to think about a complete new kind of India. And
Samartha, may I just say one thing? You know, I may, because I'm aware that discussing Jawaharlal ji is like discussing a very universal theme. I had pointedly reduced the discussion to his struggle against three things, that is communalism, obscurantism, and feudalism. And I have tried to confine myself to that issue. The issue which you are raising is another issue.
Yes.
And on that, I have written an article. If you are interested, I will send it to you. Actually, I think I've sent it to you once. I've sent, when you wrote to me, I sent you that article, but it is possible you have not got it. I will send it again.
Please do it.
Yeah.
I just want to make one point. Samartha, I think it was last year that me and Nauriya ji were also having a conversation, and our topic was on the socialism and Nehru. I think even Nauriya ji remembers, I hope.
Yeah.
Yes, and that time I raised few such questions which you just now referred to. So I probably have the recording, which I will also send you. Few of those things about the nation making and all. So now in the chat box, I don't find any other question. There are two questions which also I don't find relevant for today's topic, is that what did Nehru do for the removal of untouchability, and who was most socialist, India or Nehru? So I don't think those are somehow at all relevant, and I'm sure that Anil will not be, would not love to, kind of discuss on that. So anyone else who can there's already Satyanath Chaudhary ji has raised his hand.
And Ananta Giriji.
Yeah, and Ananta Giriji. Yeah. Please unmute and ask. Satyanath ji, please unmute and ask.
All right. Thank you very much. I have two questions. Anil ji mentioned about Dr. Ambedkar's some things. So I'm not clear about something. He probably would clarify. Initially, Dr. Ambedkar came into the Constituent Assembly through East Bengal, where one Mr. Mandal enabled him somehow to get into the Constituent Assembly. Then after that, I think there was an election to get him elected from Bombay or something, and he was able to stay in the Constituent Assembly through that, right? Please, if I'm mistaken, correct me. Then I guess if he got elected from Mumbai, then he must have been supported by the Congress, even though he was not a member of the Congress. So why couldn't the same be done when a new election in 1952 was going to be held or something? So that's one question which I'm not very clear about. Probably Anil would like to educate me about it. The second question I have is, Anilji mentioned about his desire for including the backward castes among the recipients of special provision for jobs and education, etc. And to that end, I guess Kalka Commission was made or something. But it seems to me that Nehruji didn't really want the OBCs to be given a reservation or something. So Kalka Commission was shelved. And then later Mandal Commission was formed. And I don't know, by that time probably I think Nehru was not there anymore or something. So please clarify these two particular things to me. Thank you very much.
Well, Anantji, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
You see, I was not today speaking on the Nehru-Ambedkar relationship. So your first question, really, I will not deal with right now. Now, your second question is about the OBC reservation, Nehru's desire. It's not just desire. The first constitutional amendment, if it had not come, and if Jawaharlalji had not brought that amendment in May, June 1951, there would have been no basis for any commission, Kaka Kalelkar or Mandal or anything. The Kaka Kalelkar commission and the Mandal commission came only because the first amendment came. And the first amendment introduced clause 4 of Article 15, which said that there can be reservation for socially and educationally backward classes. And that will not be questioned on grounds of lack of equality. So what you are saying is that it's not the Kalka Commission, by the way, it is Kaka Kalelkar. Kaka Kalelkar was a freedom fighter, and he set up this Hindustani Sahitya Sabha, which you have at Rajghat next to the Gandhi National Museum. And Kaka Kalelkar headed that first commission. He was a great intellectual. He had taught at Shantiniketan and so on. And the report was not implemented, that is true. But to conclude from that Jawaharlalji did not desire reservations for backward classes would not, I think, be correct, because what the purpose of this amendment, the first amendment, was that they had started, there were already some reservations for backward classes in the provinces before independence. And they had also come in the provinces, in the states after independence. Now the courts had started interfering with these reservations. So what Jawaharlalji's amendment did was, by introducing clause 4 in Article 15, it protected those reservations. It said that nothing in this article or in clause 2 of Article 29 shall prevent the state from making any special provision for the advancement of any socially and educationally backward classes of citizens or for the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. So now what had happened was that this pre-existing reservations, which existed in various states, had started being questioned by the courts on the grounds of Article 15. And you would note that Article 15 is something new, because Article 15 came as a result of the Constitution, and it started in 1950. So that became a new thing, and that became a weapon for the courts to start questioning pre-existing reservations. So to protect those reservations, Article 15(4) was introduced. The Kaka Kalelkar Commission, which you are speaking of, is about reservations for central government employees. But this reservation, this provision which was introduced by the First Amendment, it's across the board. It protects pre-existing reservations in the states, as well as enables the central government to make reservations in the states, at the center, in the future. And so today the reservations that you have under Mandal is primarily a result, the foundation is laid by this amendment, the first amendment that was brought at Jawaharlalji's initiative. That is what I said.
But how come the Kaka Kalelkar Commission's report were not, implemented?
There might have been a number of reasons. That is not the topic of my subject of my talk today. My subject of my talk was the first, what I was pointing out was that the first amendment, which was introduced at the behest of Jawaharlal ji, did the following things. And one of the things it did was to lay the foundation for that reservation. Now, why specifically Kaka Kalelkar's report was accepted or not accepted is an executive matter of a future government. I'm sorry, I will have to look that up for you. But I cannot at the moment tell you why a particular report was accepted or not accepted. But all I can say is that there would have been no basis for that report or the Mandal report if this Article 15.4 were not there, which is introduced by the First Amendment.
Yeah. Thank you, Sandeep ji. Professor Anandgiri has some questions. Sir, please ask.
Thank you, Anil ji. Thank you, Abhishek, and all friends co-present. Thank you for your very deep engagement, Anil ji.
Who is speaking, please?
Professor Anandgiri.
Yes.
Oh.
Now, in terms of your key concern, Nehru's fight against communalism, feudalism, and obscurantism, and of course, the question of secularism is entangled here vis-a-vis fight against communalism. My first query is that what is the spiritual foundation and nurturance of Nehru in terms of his secularity as well as fight against communalism? My second query is, yes, Nehru was against feudalism, but there is a distinction between the so-called visible feudalism and modern feudalism. Look at, for example, bureaucracy. Now, the independent state, it just, continued the colonial feudal bureaucracy. And Nehru's own life, his way of life, where did Nehru live as a freedom fighter after he became the Prime Minister of India? In Tinmurti House, this big bungalow. So therefore, I would like to draw your attention to disjunction between fight against so-called the feudalism of the past, as well as the visible feudalism, and in a way, Nehru's own way of life, which embodied a sense of, royalty, and the disjunction between that. And therefore, the fight against feudalism, if we take it as a contemporary challenge, it has to address this kind of modern feudalism, bureaucratic feudalism, including the feudalism in the lifestyles of those who fight for freedom and socialism.
Right. So, Anand, have you completed your questions, Anand? Bhai?
Yes, please.
Now, are there going to be any more, or should I conclude? This is your last?
I have just one clarification. I think is the it was the initiative of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru for the abolition of fundamental right to property.
No. No. But
then what was his take on?
No. That's anyway. Let me first deal with
Right.
The trouble is that sometimes when a question is put, it is not put to elicit information or my view, but it is to put forth your opinion of a particular person, that you feel that a person had a particular lifestyle, and therefore you make that statement, and therefore I am supposed to respond to your view, which since you've already stated a view, I don't think I would be able to modify. But I would just say that so far as the house Tinmurti is concerned, it was a house which was there. it would have continued to be there if even if Jawaharlalji had not moved there. He moved not into the whole house, he moved into a small suite in one wing of the house. The rest of the house was used to accommodate his offices and other staff. His, so to really use that to condemn and to disregard the entire fight that he conducted against obscurantism, against feudalism, against communalism, I think would not at all be fair. If you think that because he moved in as prime minister, he didn't take it over as his own personal house. He moved in as prime minister, and that became the official residence of the Prime Minister of India. So I don't think I would utilize that to, I mean, one might say, why did Lenin live in a Kremlin? Kremlin is even bigger. So therefore, there was no, therefore disregard the Russian Revolution because Lenin lived in Kremlin. I don't think these kind of, on the other hand, the 10 Downing Street is by itself a very small piece of property, but it was controlling an entire worldwide empire. So I don't think these matters, the role of a person or the role of a system is to be judged by the size of the house of the Prime Minister. I think these are very subjective matters in any case. So I would prefer to go by the facts on the ground relating to the subjects on which I spoke today. About the other question which you had about secularism, whether it was related to spirituality and so on. See, whatever it was related to, one thing you must, I think we should remember. I wonder if you have seen D.G. Tendulkar's multiple part volumes on biography of the Mahatma. Now, in one of those volumes, he describes the formulation of the Karachi Resolution of 1931. And he says that before the resolution was passed at the Karachi Congress in March 1931, there were long discussions between him and Gandhiji about the content of that resolution. And that is the resolution in which it was finally agreed that the state in India would be religiously neutral, that the state will be religiously neutral. These are the words in the Karachi resolution. Now you notice that after this resolution, prior to this resolution, sometimes there are statements by Gandhiji that my politics and my religion are intertwined and so on. But after the March 1931 resolution, you will not find that kind of statement. Because regardless of whatever views Gandhiji may have had on religion and politics, after March 1931 Karachi resolution, both Gandhi and Nehru were agreed that so far as the state is concerned, the state of independent India, that will be religiously neutral. And this is the underlying basis of the secularism, both of Jawaharlal Nehru and, so far as the state is concerned, of Mahatma Gandhi. So there should be no doubt on this score. Any further explications of this one can always make and so on, and it's an endless, in a way, endless debate. So this is, I think, the question. Then there was one other question which I think Abhishek put.
No, I think Randhirji asked one question. I think that is supposed to be the last question of this session. Randhirji, will you please ask your question?
Right to property.
Yes, Randhir. Yes. Right to property. Now, on that, I was going to say that the right to property actually is a right which was introduced in the Fundamental Rights chapter at the time of the formulation of the Constitution. Then, when the emergency was declared in 1975, and the right to enforce fundamental rights was suspended during the emergency. Then, after the emergency was over, the new government, the Janata government, which came in 1977, they wanted to reverse some of the constitutional changes that Indira Gandhi's government had made relating to the declarations of emergency and so on, to make it, to ensure that in a future regime, the right to life can never be suspended. In a future emergency, the right to life cannot be suspended. They made some changes, but they also, one of the things they did was, because the Constitution speaks of suspension of fundamental rights, they took the right to property out of the fundamental rights chapter and took it to another part of the Constitution, saying that the right to property will no longer be a fundamental right. But the irony of that change was that actually the right to property therefore became non-suspendable, because the fundamental rights are suspended during an emergency. But if you take the right to property out of the fundamental rights chapter and put it in another part of the Constitution, then the right to property is not affected by the declaration of the emergency. So there was a sort of dissonance between their purpose and what they actually achieved by that change. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you, Anilji. Randhirji, there is a message, I think, from you that please invite Professor Shashi Shekharji, but yeah.
He's
online because
he's functioning here under the name Ankita Kumari.
Okay. So I think anyone who wants to ask Anilji any question or wants to discuss or give some comment, please don't hesitate and unmute yourself and do that, please.
पहले शशि शेखर जी को बहुत बधाई, उन्होंने काफी शानदार एक आर्टिकल लिखा समता मार्ग में, हमारे बच्चे ने शेयर किया।
Unmute and ask your question.
बस कमेंट है।
मेरा सुझाव है कि शशि शेखर जी ये सबको अनिल जी को धन्यवाद देते हुए और अपनी बात रखते हुए सत्र का समापन भी करें।
हाँ,
धन्यवाद संदीप भाई।
लेकिन अगर वो कोई सवाल करेंगे तो मुझे
नहीं, बिल्कुल नहीं, मुझे तो कहा गया है कि मैं धन्यवाद ज्ञापन करूं। तो अनिल जी, आपका रिसर्च जो प्रेजेंटेशन है वो तो हो चुका है और उस पर बहुत सारे सवाल जवाब हो चुके हैं, तो अब कोई आज के लिए सवाल नहीं है। फिर भविष्य में जब कोई चर्चा होगी तो फिर उस पर सवाल भी उठेंगे, क्योंकि चर्चा को आगे बढ़ाने के लिए सवाल भी जरूरी है। तो आज तो मैं आपको सोसाइटी फॉर कम्युनल हार्मनी और सोशलिस्ट पार्टी की तरफ से हृदय से आभार प्रकट करता हूं कि आपने बहुत बढ़िया प्रेजेंटेशन दिया और तमाम साथियों के सवालों के भी आपने पूरी गंभीरता के साथ जवाब दिए, और जहां आवश्यक हुआ आपने ये भी कहा कि यह आज के चर्चा का विषय नहीं है, इसलिए संदेह इस पर चर्चा आज नहीं हो सकती है, जो जरूरी है, क्योंकि अंततः जो टाइटल किसी भी चर्चा का तय किया जाता है उसमें अगर तमाम तरह के सवालों को लाया जाएगा तो फिर चर्चा का किसी प्रकार से अंत भी नहीं हो पाएगा और फोकस भी शिफ्ट हो जाता है। मुझे लगता है कि आज नेहरू जी की जयंती है और नेहरू जी की जयंती पे आपने नेहरू जी के संबंध में सांप्रदायिकता पर उनके विचार या फ्यूडलिज्म से संबंधित विचार या जो सेकुलरिज्म से संबंधित विचार, और उस दरमियान आपने उन सारी बातों को भी बताया जो हिस्टोरिकली अपने बहुत सारे जो कोट किए और बहुत सारे जो प्रेजेंटेशन, रिसर्च प्रेजेंटेशन दिए हैं। मुझे लगता है कि आप निसंदेह बहुत बहुत बधाई और धन्यवाद के पात्र हैं। और अक्सर आपका जो प्रेजेंटेशन होता है वो तथ्यों पर भी आधारित होता है और तथ्यों पर आधारित विश्लेषण होता है, तो उससे बहुत सारी शंकाओं का समाधान तो स्वयं हो जाता है। मैं आपके प्रति सोसाइटी फॉर कम्युनल हार्मनी और सोशलिस्ट पार्टी की तरफ से धन्यवाद ज्ञापन करता हूँ। साथ ही साथ अपने तमाम जो हमारे आज साथी मौजूद हैं और जिन्होंने बहुत सारे सवाल किए, उनकी इस भागीदारी के लिए भी उनके प्रति हृदय से आभार प्रकट करता हूँ। अभिषेक जी ने जो एक प्रकार से एंकरिंग की है और कंपेयरिंग भी की है उसकी, तो उनके प्रति भी हृदय से आभार। रणधीर तो हमेशा तमाम इस प्रकार के कार्यक्रमों के पीछे रह करके उसका योजनाबद्ध तरीके से प्रेजेंटेशन करते रहे हैं, तो उनके प्रति तो आभार है ही और हमेशा उनके प्रति आभार रहेगा। साथ ही साथ हमारे संदीप भाई हैं और इस प्रकार के कार्यक्रमों को वो करवाते हैं। सोसाइटी फॉर कम्युनल हार्मनी भी इस प्रकार के कार्यक्रमों में भागीदारी और शिरकत करती रही है, तो मुझे लगता है कि